This is definitely the scariest Thai horror movie I've ever seen. As soon as the movie was released, it successfully secured a top 3 spot in the space box office. The film blends elements of horror, witchcraft, and taboo into one. While challenging the psychological limits of the audience, it also vividly portrays the cycle of cause and effect. At the beginning of the story, a man is fishing in the river using ducks. After much effort, he catches a catfish, but he can't get the fish hook off. Angrily, he yanks hard, and cuts his thumb in the process. At first, the man doesn't care, but that night, he suddenly falls ill with bloody holes appearing all over his body. His family is terribly frightened. They send him to a shaman for treatment. The shaman pulls a fish hook out of one of the bloody holes. She immediately realizes that the man has been cursed with black magic. Then, she chants incantations while twisting beads on a Buddhist prayer table, and engages in a spiritual battle with the sorcerer from afar. Unfortunately, the sorcerer ultimately gains the upper hand. All the fish hooks burrow out of the man's body at once, torturing him to death. From then on, the town is shrouded in rumors of the sorcerer's killings. Meanwhile, on the other side, several college students who had just started their vacation received a call from their high school friend Atta, inviting them to attend his father's funeral. So the 5 young people agreed to take the train back to the countryside together. Since graduating from high school, none of them had seen Atta. The small town inevitably reminded them of the carefree high school days. Back then, he and Atta were a couple. They often visited his home. Atta's stepmother, Teacher Pan, was young, beautiful, and had a good personality, and always entertained them warmly. But she doted on her own son, who spent money like water, and was indifferent towards the sensible Atta. Everyone teased that Atta's father was strict. Now, the small town and Atta had long since broken up, and he had become a couple with Abo, the guy with glasses. As soon as they got off the train, they saw Atta. He was still as cheerful and charming as before. When he saw his ex-girlfriend holding hands with his good brother, a hint of loneliness flashed in his eyes. Through casual conversation, everyone learned that 2 years ago, Atta's younger brother got into a fight, but his stepmother made him take the blame for his brother, and he was sent to a reformatory for 2 years. After he came out, he was informed that his father had already committed suicide with a gun. While they were chatting, the janitor nearby was looking at them with a strange expression. The townspeople felt uneasy under his gaze, urging everyone to leave quickly. Later on, they encountered police arresting hooligans on the road. This reminded Atai of an experience from a few years ago. Once, after his brother had fought someone in the street, Ggu actually beat Atai severely in front of her husband, insisting that she was the one who had led her brother astray. Afterwards, their father just consoled Atai, telling her not to hold a grudge against Teacher Pan. After all, they were all family, but Atai harbored resentment in her heart, secretly following Teacher Pan all day long. Indeed, she discovered an earth-shattering secret. Ggu was actually playing games with the PE teacher in the classroom behind their father's back. She told her father about it that very day, but to her surprise, not only did her father not believe her, he also scolded her. In order to make her father see the truth, Atai and a few others stole the school's video recorder, intending to record the process of Ggu watching the little turtle. However, they were caught on the spot because they were filming too close. Fortunately, Abo was quick-eyed and nimble-handed. He hid the videotape in advance, leading the PE teacher to mistakenly believe they hadn't captured anything. But Duran didn't expect that after the lecherous PE teacher caught them, he would actually attempt to molest the female student, Xiaoyu. Otherwise, they would be accused of stealing school equipment and sent to the police station. Seeing that Xiao Enyu was about to be punished, and this time, the punishment, seeing Xiao Enyu was about to be humiliated, the 3 boys exchanged glances and suddenly took action together, beating up the PE teacher. But they never expected that the other party would pull out a handgun from the drawer. Now, not only was Ji Ren caught again, but he was also forced to witness Xiao Enyu being humiliated. Afterwards, Atta and his classmates sought revenge for Xiao Enyu by finding a notorious local black magic sorcerer to cast a curse on the PE teacher. It turns out he was the fisherman at the beginning of the video, who died from the curse. But at this time, Ji Ren did not know that a great terror was waiting for them. These high school students before us, despite the sorcerer's warnings, insisted on using the most evil Thai curse to take revenge on the PE teacher who had humiliated them. Following the sorcerer's instructions, they took the teacher's files, secretly photographed him, took his personal belongings, and even collected soil he had walked on, and finally packaged everything to give to the sorcerer. They only saw the sorcerer chanting an unknown spell. Insert the fish hook into the body of the catfish. Sure enough, it wasn't long before the PE teacher died from a fishbone puncture. What was surprising, however, was that shortly after the PE teacher's death, the school's television openly broadcast a video of her playing a game with a female teacher. After this major shooting incident, her husband no longer paid any attention to Teacher Pan, and she herself became increasingly deranged, often stabbing her thigh with an awl in the office. Atta was deeply shocked by this scene. She didn't understand why everyone had just cursed the PE teacher, how even her stepmother could end up like this. Several years later, Her father also died mysteriously. At that time, Atta was taking a boat home with her friends. Strangely enough, although there were clearly 5 of them, the boatman only charged for 4 people, and then left. Everyone just thought it was a mistake due to her old age and poor eyesight. After attending Atta's father's funeral, they went to visit Teacher Pan, and to their surprise, after several years, she was still as elegant and charming as before. There's not even a hint of madness about her now. Looking at her now, she no longer cares about the fact that she was secretly photographed by several people before. She even warmly welcomes them. At this moment, the girl Xiaoyu receives a phone call from home. She learns that her father has been suddenly hospitalized. She needs to go back to take care of him. Xiaoyu has no choice but to say goodbye to everyone and leave alone. Meanwhile, Atta secretly meets with his ex-girlfriend Xiaoqing, hoping to rekindle their past relationship. It turns out that the reason they broke up initially was because Xiaoqing had been admitted to university, while Atta had failed the entrance exam. He could only stay in the countryside, but now Xiaoqing is already with a Bao. Naturally, she cannot agree to Atta's request. Afterwards, they maintain a superficial relationship. They jump into the river together for a swim. But at this moment, Xiaoqing discovers that bubbles are constantly emerging near a wooden stake. Immediately following, a pale human face slowly surfaces from below. Xiaoqing is startled. However, when everyone looks towards the wooden stake together, but they found nothing. They just thought Xiaoqing was hallucinating. Meanwhile, on the other side, Teacher Pan was in the kitchen preparing dinner for everyone. From the bloodstains on the cutting board, one could guess that the ingredients being cooked in the pot must be very fresh. In the evening, Xiaoqing carried a plate of food intending to feed the cat, but as soon as she approached, a meek little cat was frightened and ran into Grandma Atta's room. But the next second, a scream from the kitten was heard inside the room. As the door creaked open, Xiaoqing saw her grandmother sitting inside, swallowing cat meat raw. This horrifying scene made her scream in terror. Several people hurried over upon hearing the scream, but Atta calmly snatched the cat away. Seeing this, the grandmother, still very reluctantly, cried out that she was very hungry. Afterwards, Atta told everyone that the grandmother had long been suffering from dementia and had no idea what she was doing. He told them not to be afraid, but judging by the expressions of the others, it was clear they didn't quite believe his words. Before dinner started, Teacher Pan was muttering to his son's photo, claiming he needed to dress up well to entertain the guests. Then he slowly removed his clothes, revealing skin covered in mysterious runes. Even his gaze became murderous. Teacher Pan took a human head out of the wine jar, while continuously chanting spells. Then he pulled out 3 corpses. He took the short-haired girl, Abo, and Ake's photo, and placed them on the foreheads of the corpses. In no time, a black mist slowly drifted from the room towards the window, turning the moon blood-red. The people eating inside the house were completely unaware that they had been cursed, and kept praising Teacher Pan's cooking skills. But the next second, Ake spat out the food from his mouth onto the ground. Inside was a familiar piece of nail art. At this moment, Abo Xiaojing also discovered Snake Ding and Mai Tong. They finally realized what was being cooked in the pot. Ake kicked over the pot with 1 foot, revealing half of Xiao Enyu's face. It turned out that Xiao Enyu had not left. Instead, they were brutally killed by Teacher Pan. Several people immediately fell to the ground outside, vomiting uncontrollably. They finally understood that Teacher Pan had never forgotten the harm they had done to him, and had been waiting for an opportunity to take revenge. Everyone mustered their courage and rushed into Teacher Pan's room, wanting to settle the score with him, but there was no sign of him in the room. They only found the school's camera in the wardrobe, which shockingly contained footage of Teacher Pan eating human flesh. In the end, he even bludgeoned the person filming to death with a wooden stick. What on earth was going on? Did Atta's father really commit suicide out of guilt? This woman cut her palm with a knife, and smeared the blood over the corpse's eyes. The next second, a sudden gust of cold wind blew into the face of the short-haired girl. She rubbed her eyes, and when she opened them again, she was instantly scared half to death. It turned out that her third eye had been forcibly opened by someone. At that moment, 3 pale-faced ghosts were staring right at her. After a series of eerie events, they no longer dared to stay there, and immediately ran to the riverbank to leave Atta's home. After a difficult wait, a boat finally arrived, but unexpectedly, on the boatman's way over, Teacher Pan teleported directly in front of him. The boatman was so frightened that he fell into the river on the spot. Only the small boat was left, rushing towards them. Xiaojing immediately jumped into the water to escape the danger. In an instant, her soul left her body and traveled back to a few years ago, where she witnessed Teacher Pan torturing her husband. It turned out that ever since the video of Teacher Pan playing with the little turtle was exposed, her husband had wanted to leave her. So, Teacher Pan decided to strike first, and after tying up her husband, she proceeded to pull out his toenails one by one. Unable to bear the humiliation, her husband eventually committed suicide with a gun. The handgun then slid under the bed. The grandmother, upon learning the situation, couldn't bear the shock, and became senile. After Xiaojing was rescued, she told everyone what she had seen. Sure enough, a handgun was found under the bed. Just then, the room door suddenly closed automatically, and the lights inside the room flickered on and off. Tyler suddenly saw a ghost standing at the door, which frightened him so much that he quickly turned his back. Then he realized that there were already several ghosts crouching on the window behind him, staring straight at him. Tyler was scared half to death, and everyone helped him to the village temple, hoping to receive the protection of the deities. Unexpectedly, Teacher Pan suddenly bent over towards her. As soon as the words were spoken, Teacher Pan stuffed a gecko into the corpse. Instantly, countless geckos crawled out of Ake's body, causing him to die on the spot. His death made Abo realize that since Teacher Pan had no intention of sparing them, it was better to take the initiative to strike. He decided to go out with Atta to find Teacher Pan's whereabouts. The two had just left when Ter saw a ghost lying on Xiao Jing's shoulder. He was so frightened that he rolled and crawled out of the temple. Ter, whose sanity was gradually collapsing, simply gouged out his own eyes in desperation. This way, he would never see ghosts again. However, the blind Ter scrambled on the ground and unexpectedly plunged headfirst into a pot of hot oil. Tattooed Abo rushed over and hurriedly embraced his girlfriend Xiao Jing. Unexpectedly, the Xiao Jing in his arms instantly turned into Teacher Pan. In order to force Abo to reveal the truth of that year, Teacher Pan, holding a pair of tweezers, pulled out his teeth one by one. Abo, unable to bear the pain, finally revealed the secret buried deep in his heart. Initially, he was infatuated with Teacher Pan's beauty. He secretly sought a sorcerer to cast a love spell for him. The spell would make the person fall madly in love with him, but he could never have imagined that the PE teacher would also find a sorcerer and successfully make Teacher Pan fall in love with someone else. This indirectly led to his son, Atta, discovering his actions. What was even more unexpected for Abo was that the PE teacher he despised was also bisexual. After catching them secretly recording a video, aside from pouring out his anger, he also raped him. Abo, unable to bear the humiliation, blamed everything on Teacher Pan's infidelity, and thus publicly played Teacher Pan's video at school, causing him to lose all his dignity. Then he sought the sorcerer again, and had him cast the most torturous curse, making Teacher Pan self-harm daily with an iron spike, stabbing himself until he was covered in blood. He had no choice but to seek help from a witch, and learned that the only way to lift the curse was to kill the sorcerer and consume his flesh and blood. But by doing so, he would also inherit the sorcerer's dark magic. Normally, inheriting such power would likely drive a person mad, but to survive, Teacher Pan had no choice but to comply. Ever since inheriting the power of the curse master, Teacher Pan began to worship an evil deity, believing that purification by fire could erase one's sins. He thought it could wipe away his wrongdoings. Therefore, he offered his own troublemaking son as a sacrifice to the evil deity. After Abo confessed his crimes, the hallucinations disappeared instantly. Standing before him were clearly his girlfriend Xiao Jing and Atta. The two of them could not forgive the crimes he had committed. They left him alone here. Every now and then, Teacher Pan would tie Abo to a small cabin, threatening to purify his sins before the evil deity. Teacher Pan first injected Abo with a muscle relaxant, rendering him immobile. Then he poured a kettle of hot water into his mouth. Initially, he had used the same method to purify his son. Meanwhile, Atta and another person in the forest accidentally found the cell phone dropped by Xiao Enyu. Finally, they made contact with the outside world and called the police. In the end, the police fatally shot Teacher Pan while he was committing the act. Xiao Jing was also sent back to the hospital for treatment. With this experience, he wanted to reconcile and make amends with Atta. At this moment, the TV was broadcasting the murder case involving Teacher Pan. Suddenly, Atta's photo appeared on the TV. It turns out that the person Teacher Pan had bludgeoned to death with a wooden stick was Atta. Xiao Jing finally understood why others looked at them with strange eyes, why the boatman charged them for one less person, because they couldn't see Atta at all. In fact, Atta's ghost had been following Xiao Jing all along, but it wasn't because of love. It turns out that years ago, Xiao Jing had made a bet with a classmate to see who could make Atta fall in love with them first. In order to win the bet, Xiao Jing sought out a sorcerer to cast a love spell on Atta, which made him willing to stay with Xiao Jing even as a ghost, until she became lovers with Abo. Atta could no longer bear it, and tricked everyone into going back to the countryside, to let them experience the pain he had gone through. Ultimately, under Atta's influence, Xiao Jing leapt from the building and died on the spot. But because of the existence of the love spell, the two can be said to love each other even in death. What goes around comes around, evil begets evil. As Teacher Pan, who runs throughout the entire story, is actually the most pitiable person, and the few students who were unwittingly caught up in it all can only resign themselves to their bad luck. Alright, that's the end of today's story. Im Xiang Zhu, see you next time. This is definitely the scariest Thai horror movie I've ever seen. As soon as the movie was released, it successfully secured a top 3 spot in the space box office. The film blends elements of horror, witchcraft, and taboo into one. While challenging the psychological limits of the audience, it also vividly portrays the cycle of cause and effect. At the beginning of the story, a man is fishing in the river using ducks. After much effort, he catches a catfish, but he can't get the fish hook off. Angrily, he yanks hard, and cuts his thumb in the process. At first, the man doesn't care. But that night, he suddenly falls ill with bloody holes appearing all over his body. His family is terribly frightened. They send him to a shaman for treatment. The shaman pulls a fish hook out of one of the bloody holes. She immediately realizes that the man has been cursed with black magic. Then, she chants incantations while twisting beads on a Buddhist prayer table, and engages in a spiritual battle with the sorcerer from afar. Unfortunately, the sorcerer ultimately gains the upper hand. All the fish hooks burrow out of the man's body at once, torturing him to death. From then on, the town is shrouded in rumors of the sorcerer's killings. Meanwhile, on the other side, several college students, who had just started their vacation, received a call from their high school friend Atta, inviting them to attend his father's funeral. So the 5 young people agreed to take the train back to the countryside together. Since graduating from high school, none of them had seen Atta. The small town inevitably reminded them of the carefree high school days. Back then, he and Atta were a couple. They often visited his home. Atta's stepmother, Teacher Pan, was young, beautiful, and had a good personality, and always entertained them warmly. But she doted on her own son, who spent money like water, and was indifferent towards the sensible Atta. Everyone teased that Atta's father was strict. Now, the small town and Atta had long since broken up, and he had become a couple with Atta, the guy with glasses. As soon as they got off the train, they saw Atta. He was still as cheerful and charming as before. When he saw his ex-girlfriend holding hands with his good brother, a hint of loneliness flashed in his eyes. Through casual conversation, everyone learned that 2 years ago, Atta's younger brother got into a fight, but his stepmother made him take the blame for his brother, and he was sent to a reformatory for 2 years. After he came out, he was informed that his father had already committed suicide with a gun. While they were chatting, the janitor nearby was looking at them with a strange expression. The townspeople felt uneasy under his gaze, urging everyone to leave quickly. Later on, they encountered police arresting hooligans on the road. This reminded Atai of an experience from a few years ago. Once, after his brother had fought someone in the street, Ggu actually beat Atai severely in front of her husband, insisting that she was the one who had led her brother astray. Afterwards, their father just consoled Atai, telling her not to hold a grudge against Teacher Pan. After all, they were all family. But Atai harbored resentment in her heart, secretly following Teacher Pan all day long. Indeed, she discovered an earth-shattering secret. Ggu was actually playing games with the PE teacher in the classroom behind their father's back. She told her father about it that very